Welcome back to another professional picks video. Today we're going to be looking at the Pac-12, and I'll try to fit a video in on the Big 12 before the season starts, although there's only 9 days left. And just overall, I don't feel too great about this conference. There's a couple good teams at the top, but they definitely won't be as strong as last year or surprised in March Madness as much. So I'm going to be going through those lower ranked teams a little bit quicker. Just make sure you guys are liking and subscribing if you guys are enjoying these videos, because in about a week I'll be putting out my picks, whether it's one weekly video or splitting it up into two for each week to get a little bit deeper analysis on games. But with that, we'll jump right into it. As always, we have our partnership with Prize Picks. See in the left, they'll match your first deposit up to $100 using our promo code PROPICKS. I don't believe it's case sensitive, but just throw it all in caps regardless. And this offer is really great for college basketball, and I think you guys should take advantage of it because you can't find player props on, say, like DraftKings, FanDuel, your really major sports books. So I use Prize Picks specifically for college sports, for example, and then just kind of how it works. You have your flex play. You can still get one of your legs wrong and make some of your money back on a two entry flex play. But let's say you do three or more and just one of your legs misses, you'll actually profit. And then the power play is your traditional parlay. Once again, ProPicks is the promo code on the left there. And we'll start this rankings video off with our top 10. Not going to be looking at the 11th or 12th spots, even though I think the bottom three teams all are pretty bad in this conference. But at number 10, I have Washington. They've definitely underperformed the last few seasons. So I shouldn't be too excited about saying I like this team's potential to overperform. But I kind of do, even though they're at number 10. They got Terrell Brown Jr., who started his career in Seattle and then transferred to Arizona, and now he's over at Washington. He really lit him up his either 1 or 2 years ago, but ever since then he's been on the Huskies' radar, and they're finally bringing him in to start at point guard. And then Dejon Davis is the most interesting transfer they got. He's the only player on this Huskies roster that's all Pac-12 in the preseason, so you're probably expecting him to do most of the scoring. And just kind of interesting little tidbit of information. But Terrell Brown Jr. and Dejon Davis and Emmett Matthews are all from the Seattle area, and they all transferred back to school. There might be a little bit of chemistry there. But yeah, like I just mentioned, Emmett Matthews, he's also a transfer. He's coming from West Virginia. I actually like his game a lot. I thought he should have saw a little bit more minutes over there. I want them to start him at the power forward, go a little small, because he's very athletic. They're going to want to run with this slightly smaller team. Washington's not going to play good defense like they have for the last few years. But they do have a lot of experience in their starting lineup. If you look there, you got 4 seniors. So that's why I gave them the 10 spot, say, over Utah. And then California is probably your for sure worst team in the conference. They need an improved defense, like I mentioned, a little bit undersized, so I don't expect that to come through. It's going to be a lot of overs in these games, probably a lot of blowouts, and they'll be losing many of them too. And the big problem is I don't exactly see a lead scorer. I think it'll probably be Dejon Davis, but he wasn't even the best player on Stanford, even top 3 last year. So that just kind of explains this Washington team a little bit. At number 9, we got Stanford. They finished last year 7th in the conference, and I think they underperformed a bit, but I don't think their roster is any better than they were last year. Oscar Da Silva, I believe it was, he was their lead scorer in the post, senior, grabbed a lot of boards, scored a ton, and then obviously Zaire Williams went in the draft to the Grizzlies, but although he didn't put up great numbers his freshman year, he's obviously a presence on the court, rebounding, scoring on the defensive end. So you're definitely going to miss that, even though they kind of replaced that with Harrison Ingram, a little bit shorter but stronger power forward. I'll be interested to see how this team holds up in the post in this conference. Jane Delaire and Spencer Jones aren't your traditional defensive players. They're a little bit athletic, score a little bit more. So I'm a little bit worried about this team on the defensive end. It's going to definitely be a group effort between small forward through center to rebound the ball. And I think it's interesting that they have this 2-point guard system. I think they'll take care of the ball pretty well. Maybe score a little bit, but once again, I don't love it on the size wise and athleticism guarding the perimeter. I think the Stanford team is going to give up a ton of points. Overall, could surprise in a couple games because they have some scorers, but the defense isn't there, so they won't be consistent enough to compete in the Pac-12, in my opinion. Number 8, we got Oregon State. Obviously going to miss Ethan Thompson, who did everything for them, but they really came on at the end of last year. Jared Lucas kind of shined. He'll probably be your leading scorer this year. And then I really like the 1-2 punch between him and Worth LSD. I think he could average double-double this year. And then also, I think it was a pretty big pickup getting Trey Williams from Minnesota. I think he's going to improve a bit, but that just provides really nice, solid defender, score a little bit. But it's always nice to have a classic small forward guy who could fill that role instead of going 3 guards just for the defensive presence that it provides. I think there's a lot of upside for this roster. Everybody's pretty tall in general. You got Roman Silva, 7'2", and then, but just also don't expect him to provide too much on the scoring end. It's pretty slow. And then Gianni Hunt, I'm not also expecting very much from, but I think he'll see a little bit of improvement from last year. This team I'm not too sure on. I honestly think they could end up at the number 9 spot, but they just played so well at the end of the last year. I kind of believe a little bit in that momentum that they established. Then we got Colorado at 7. They finished, I want to say, 3rd in the conference last year. Obviously, they're going to miss McKinley Wright. He also did everything for them. And that's why I just think this conference isn't going to be as good as it was last year. A lot of these teams in the middle of the pack to the second half of the conference, they all lost their best players. I don't think you're going to get a ton of production out of Keyshawn Bartholomew at point guard, Eli Parquet, senior starter. So you're going to need him to come through, although he didn't really do much for them last year. He's just more of a solid role player. I think it's interesting once you get to Jabari Walker. Shot threes pretty well. He's a bigger player. Rebounds, I expect him to see a ton of improvement from freshman to sophomore year. And with all those extra shots available with McKinley Wright graduating, I think Jabari Walker could step into that lead scorer role. Obviously, nice to have Evan Beatty back. Solid scorer and rebounder. There's just not too much to be excited about with this roster. The reason they still are going to be competitive this year is because they're number 1 ranked freshman class in the Pac-12. Lawson Lovering at 63. He'll start at center. That'll be really interesting to see how he comes in and plays day 1. But they also have KJ Simpson, combo guard, number 88 overall in the nation. I think he can end up starting with Parquet in the backcourt. Or then you also got Quincy Allen, number 89 in the country, small forward. I think he will end up coming off the bench because you have Jabari Walker pretty solidified at the small forward spot. But they have some options. They have a lot of potential, but just on paper, I'm not in love with this team. Also, aside from losing McKinley Wright, they lost Jariah Horn, Deshaun Schwartz, and Dallas Walton. They all transferred out. So just that experience and just really proven players on Colorado. Just losing those guys is going to hurt them down the stretch. Arizona State, number 6. Bobby Hurley mentioned he wanted to have a tougher team, so he really hit the transfer portal hard. Really different outlook for this team. They definitely underperformed last year, but I'm not completely sold on Remy Martin being a team leader. He could score, but he doesn't do enough on the defensive end or take care of the ball well enough, or even his efficiency. I think they'll kind of miss Alonzo Verge, honestly. but this team just underperforms terribly last year. They did get Marcus Bagley back, who has a lot of potential at the power forward spot, but he shot under 40% last year, so he needs to be way more efficient. A lot of questions for Arizona State, but they do bring in some really good, solid transfers. Marion Jackson, I believe, from Toledo. He's going to just take over at the point guard spot and definitely provide some stability for them. Numbers are probably going to decrease a bit, but I think you could see his assist averages remaining pretty solid. Jay Heath, another transfer from Boston College. Seen a lot of guys leave Boston College this offseason, but I expect him to perform pretty similarly to how he did for Boston College. They also were in a great team last year, so I don't know how much he's going to affect this team's winning percentage. You got Kamani Lawrence coming back, and then Jalen Graham coming back too. So another interesting roster. Kind of once you get past the number 4th ranked team in this conference, I don't really love or feel great about any positions for these teams. I just feel like a lot of them can end up anywhere. A lot of them lost their best players, and a lot of them brought in a lot of transfers. So you're going to figure out kind of the Pac-12's just like forecast for the season after the first few weeks. I don't necessarily have the greatest gauge on this conference compared to the other ones, but still nice to kind of see who's going to be starting, what kind of numbers they put up. And then I have Washington State at number 5. They're really going to miss Kim Aiken Jr. They got him to transfer over early in the offseason, and then before even playing a single game for them, he transferred to Arizona, who they're going to be competing with. So just that depth's going to hurt them. I like the starting lineup a lot, but there's not much outside of it. Michael Flowers from South Alabama. He's definitely going to come in and start right away. He's going to score points. He's a little bit smaller, so I don't know if his game is going to transfer greatly, but he'll be solid at least at the point guard spot. Noah Williams put up 14, almost 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists as a sophomore in the Pac-12 in a pretty stacked conference last year. So I think he's going to blow up this year. That's why I have him at number 5. This ranking could come back to hurt me because Washington State only finished 10th in the conference last year, but I just think with some player development, I think Noah Williams can really end up being a leader. Luckily, they still have DJ Rodman, even though they lost Kim Aiken Jr., who probably would have started over him. But it's just another solid role player you could kind of rely on. And then I love the front court, 2 freshman players coming back who saw a lot of minutes last year. I think that's where you're going to see a ton of development and even maybe dominance. They're both about like 6'10", 6'11", more regarded as centers. So you're going to get a lot of rebounding, a lot of interior scoring, and blocks from Washington State in the paint. And just any team that can establish that in college basketball has a huge advantage, especially in a conference like the Pac-12, where you have about like half of the teams who are transferring in or post starting freshmen. I just think their physical dominance in the paint is really going to set them up for Noah Williams to get some shots outside, kind of create, and same with Michael Flowers. But once again, there's really no bench for this team. So I could definitely see him underperforming and ending up back around 10 even. That's why I'm not the greatest fan of this conference. I'd say 5 through 10 or 5 through 9 even can all go anyway. But for these next 4 teams, I feel pretty confident in the rankings, and I feel like these next 4 teams are going to be your only solid contenders in the whole conference. Number 4, we got Arizona. Pelly Larson, transfer from Utah, should be pretty solid. You got Benedict Mathurin coming back. He was probably going to be one of their leaders this year, as well as Tubelis, 12 points, 7 boards. So there's a lot of foreign players on this team. I think it's pretty interesting, kind of cool. But I'm getting a lot of younger guys back who performed and produced in their freshman season. So I expect a lot of development from Arizona. On top of that, they also have Kim Aiken Jr., who can end up starting and then Justin Keir from Georgia too. So this team's deeper. That's why they're number 4. They have at least 8 guys who are going to be solid in their minutes. Christian Koloko, I need to see a little bit more improvement from, but just having a guy that big who can block shots, rebound a little bit, definitely solid to have in the paint. Also provides a little bit of experience for them. Younger roster. Arizona might be a year or 2 away if they could keep some of these players. I'm also interested to see how much guys are going to be transferring in the next few years, but I really like the core that they have here. I think they're definitely outside of the top 2, but can end up in the 3 or 4 spot at the end of the year. USC, I think they're still pretty good. It's just going to be terribly hard to replace Evan Mobley. They do have a lot of returners from their Elite 8 performance last year, but Evan Mobley completely dominated the paint on the defensive end, blocks, rebounds, scoring in the paint, shooting outside. He's just really showing it with the Cavaliers so far too. So I think that's going to really just hurt this team in general. Isaiah Mobley, his brother, is pretty good, but just about a little bit worse than Evan Mobley at everything. Chavez Goodwin, we're obviously going to see some more minutes. It's good to have a senior in there at center. So just kind of similar to Arizona, I think, for front court, but I'd give Arizona the slight edge with Tubelis. Ethan Anderson, Boogie Ellis, Drew Peterson, all returners, or not all returners. Boogie Ellis is a transfer from Memphis. Was a high-ranked recruit and kind of underperformed. So he's from, I believe, the San Diego area. So having him back in California at least, maybe closer to family, a little bit more experience. I think he can end up playing a lot better because scouts definitely saw something in him when he was coming into college. Drew Peterson, from near where I live, but very solid senior, small forward, very skinny, but still rebounds because he's so tall and lengthy. Shoots well from the outside, passes a little bit. He's honestly maybe one of their most important players. My problem with this team is I don't see anybody really leading. It's probably going to have to be Boogie Ellis, and just how he's played over the last couple of years with Memphis. I don't like their chances with him taking the shots at the end of the game. Could see this team underperforming, but just they played so well last year, finished second in the conference, brought a lot of guys back. I had to put them in the 3 spot. And then next, we're going to be looking at 1 and 2. And in my opinion, these are by far the 2 best teams in the conference. And I would not be surprised if either of them wins it. Oregon at number 2. I really wanted them to have them at number 1. I'm just trying to stay a little bit consistent because almost everybody has UCLA unanimously winning the conference. But in my opinion, I think Oregon's maybe a little bit better than them this year even. Oregon finished first in the conference last year. Also, Dana Altman's finished first in the conference the last 2 years and first in the conference 4 of the last 6. So Oregon's always relevant. He always gets the most out of his players. And I actually love this roster. I know they lost Duarte, who is a very solid player, was like a late lottery pick. But the transfers they got were like some of my favorite players on all their previous teams. For example, Davion Harmon averaged about 13, 3.5 boards, 2 assists. He'll actually probably start at shooting guard. Will Richardson will be the point guard. Davion Harmon was on Oklahoma. Really solid player to have along with Austin Reeves. I just hated Oklahoma's post game last year, but I thought their guards were great between Davion Harmon, Austin Reeves, and Emoji Gibson. So you put Davion Harmon, he's already solidified. He's going to develop a little bit in his junior year. Already solidified himself as a solid 2 guard to have with another scorer. And so I just think you're going to get a lot of production out of this backcourt, similar to how Oklahoma was last year. Because Will Richardson is going to be your senior starting point guard and returner who's played his career at Oregon. He'll probably lead this team in points. I expect him to play a lot better than his 11.3 average last year. In their last 7 games of the season, last year, Will Richardson averaged 14 points and 5 assists. So he's definitely can play a little bit better than his numbers have shown. Jacob Young also is going to come off the bench. transfer from Rutgers, just a perfect spark plug. His older brother also played for Oregon, so I was kind of just following in his footsteps. But Jacob Young wants to dunk on everybody. I saw him a lot last year because I watched a ton of Big Ten basketball. I think Jacob Young is probably the perfect guy you want to bring off your bench. Averaged 14 points and 3.4 assists. So adds a lot to the offensive end. And he's athletic enough to be a plus defender as well. Eric Williams Jr., another returner for Oregon. He scores a little bit, but not very efficiently. I'd say his true strength is rebounding and being a plus defender. It's a very solid player. It's tough to get a really great small forward or center in college basketball. Usually most teams just have great guards. So not big of a knock on them, but if Eric Williams Jr. could start scoring the ball more, this team could end up being really dangerous. And then my favorite player on the whole roster, favorite player on Syracuse last year, Quincy Guerrier, averaged almost 14 points, 8.5 boards, 1.1 block. I think this is the guy that is going to take this Oregon roster over the edge. Like I mentioned, I think you're going to get a lot of guard production, but Quincy Guerrier in there with, you also have 3 potential center options to figure out, all very highly ranked recruits, whether it's N'Faly Dante or Nathan Biddle, the freshman. They're going to figure out center one way or another. And then the wild card that kind of decides the ceiling of this team is going to be the JUCO All-American Rivaldo Soares, 6'6" shooting guard, play that kind of a wing position too if he has to, but shoots the ball really well. If he transfers well to Oregon, taking the same kind of footsteps as Chris Duarte did, for Rivaldo Soares could be a guy like that. Oregon's going to be a huge problem. Even in, I said they're one of my favorite sleepers this year, and that means including the March Madness. I think this is a team that has the potential to go all the way if they could figure out their roster. Number 1, more of a formality, UCLA, first team to be in a first 4 game, go all the way to the Final Four. And they're bringing pretty much everybody back besides Chris Smith. They also Jalen Hill, but they're replacing that with Miles Johnson, starting center for Rutgers, big guy, scores, rebounds. So he could even start over Cody Riley, but Cody Riley's been a solidified starter in this team for years. So he should start at center. Cody Riley also turns 24, I think, in December. So that's just unreal experience you're going to get from your center position. We got Jaime Jaquez starting along with Johnny Juzang, 2 very similar players in my mind, although one's a shooting guard, one's a power forward on paper. Both rebound, both shoot from the perimeter very well. Jaime Jaquez scores a little bit better in the paint, a little bit drier. That's why you have the power forward position here. And then Peyton Watson, number 11 overall recruit, small forward. Before they got him to commit, I think I would have definitely given Oregon the edge. But with Peyton Watson, you got an elite freshman. And then that also puts Jules Bernard coming off the bench, another great scorer. There's just so many options for this UCLA team. They even got Juzang projected as conference player of the year. He went off in March Madness, keeps that up. He'll end up even being a lottery pick as well. Solid perimeter shooting. Here in my notes, everyone could score, like I mentioned. But the one thing that scares me a little bit is they did finish the conference last year at 4th. I think they were like 17-8 going into the conference tournament. So this team wouldn't surprise me too much to underperform. I think they got really hot at the right time. Obviously, they're playing good competition and maybe just kind of all gelled together at the right time. So you got to respect that. Final Four appearance is very difficult, but they weren't great in the regular season. I think they did get a little bit better even though, but I would not be completely surprised if this team ends outside of the top 10 at the end of the year. Just to recap it, we got UCLA at number 1, Oregon at number 2. That's my number 1 tier. I think there's a 90% chance it's one of these 2 teams, maybe 95% chance it's one of these 2 teams that win the conference. And in my opinion, I think it could be Oregon or UCLA 50-50. The second tier, these are two teams I think that could compete potentially for the number one spot. But I feel like there's even a big talent drop off from tier 1 to 2. I think tier 1's your national contenders, and tier 2 is your teams that are going to beat up on the bottom half of your conference. So I think USC and Arizona aren't any are much better. USC is worse than last year. Arizona might be a little bit better, although they weren't even great last year. And then tier 3 is, as you could see from my previous analysis, these are all teams that I feel can end up in any order. None of them are going to necessarily compete for the conference, in my opinion, but I think these teams are all pretty evenly matched up. And if you're just a viewer of Pac-12 basketball, fan of Pac-12 basketball, this might be a great season because you could kind of expect anything outside of those top two spots. And then I have Washington number 10, a lot of seniors, a lot of good transfers in my opinion, but they've continued to underperform for the last 4 or 5 years now. So I wouldn't even be surprised if they finished 11th, even 12th in the conference. That's my final rankings. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm open to any analysis you guys have. I don't feel like I have a great grasp on the 9 through 5 spots. So if you guys have any good information or any good leans on that, I would love to hear it. But I do like my rankings 1 through 4 a lot. If you disagree with me, let me know why. Get a little conversation going. But as always, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And you can expect one more Big 12 video coming out before the season starts. And then we'll start throwing some bets out there. Let's hope we win some money this year.